for, now we're starting.
Just yeah, let me do some things right there. You'll get that got it little button right there on your screen. Just click that. Miss Malbut, now you're good to go. Have a good meeting.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, as we have a quorum of the Water Resources Commission on this meeting, I'm just going to call this meeting to order. And then do you need to do the same for the select board?
Mr. Vice Chair, are you still with us or are you?
I am here.
All right, would you like to call the select board to order?
I'd like to, sure, it's August 17th, I'd like to call the Scituate Select Board to order.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Now in session. That
Right.
is a
It's unanimous.
unanimous decision.
Hi, Joanne. Hi, thank you all for joining tonight for the third annual Water Resources Commission info session. I'm Becky Malamet. I chair the Water Resources Commission, and we've got a number of our members on the line as well. We have Freya Schlegel, Emily Simmer, Bruce Arbanese, Joanne Wyckoff, and I think that is it for now. And we actually let me pull that up. Sorry. So we are the Water Resources Commission. We're an advisory board. We provide guidance and policy recommendations to the water commissioners, who are also members of the select board. We also act as a liaison between residents, town departments, and local watershed organizations, and we provide education and outreach around our drinking water resources and water conservation. So the goal of this session, as our previous sessions, has been to just bring residents up to date about the state of our water resources. It's not a coincidence that we've held all three of these in August. There's a lot that happens with our water system in the summer, and this has been proven to be a great forum for us to address some of those issues head on. We also have some members of the select board or the water commissioners here to answer questions. That the last chunk of the session will be Q&A. So we have Karen Canfield and Andrew Goodrich and Maura Curran, and I believe Karen Connolly is out there as well.
I'm here.
Great. Sean Anderson from the Water Department and Kevin Cafferty from the Department of Public Works. So let's just get started. I've got some slides. Okay. Okay, so let's just do a basic overview of the water system. So we have our water resource system is made up of both surface water and groundwater. So our surface water supply is Tack Factory Pond, the main reservoir, and Old Oaken Bucket Pond. And then we have 6 wells that use groundwater that is then treated on site and put into the distribution system. We typically rely on our wells to provide most of our water because the groundwater is a little bit cleaner. So our surface water supply is impacted by weather, it's impacted by algae, it's impacted by things like manganese. And so there's a lot more to treat out of that water, whereas the wells that is pulling the water from under the ground, and they're not as susceptible to some of those issues. And we do definitely need to run the water treatment plant to cover the increased usage that we see in the summer. So last week, only about 25% of our water came from the water treatment plant, but that's not ideal. I mean, ideally, we want to have a balanced water system where we've got some of our water provided by our wells and some by our water treatment plant, and then each has a chance to kind of rest and recharge in between usage. So unfortunately, just with the state of our water treatment plant, we're not able to do that. So the goal is to increase that in the future. So water withdrawals. So the DEP allows us to withdraw an average of 1.8 million gallons of water per day from all of those sources that I mentioned before. So that is this light blue line here. That's our max permitted withdrawal. As you can see, for most of the year, we're below that. Our annual average right now in 2021 was 1.3 million gallons per day. But that has been as high as 1.8 million gallons per day just a few years ago. But you'll see in the summer months, we've got these spikes where it goes well over that 1.8 allotment. And I've seen it go as high as 2.6 million gallons per day. And that really puts a strain on our system. So even though our annual average water usage is actually going down, to which I attribute to all the conservation measures that we've put into place, and a lot of the outdoor watering bans, total outdoor watering bans that we've had to put in place, due not necessarily to a lack of water, but due to infrastructure issues, to needing to fix a water treatment plant, needing to fix wells. So we've had to really curtail use in those instances, and that has resulted in an overall decline in water use. So currently we are in a level 3 critical drought. So as you can see from this slide, most of Massachusetts is in that same situation. What this means is that the state requires a total ban on outdoor water use, non-essential outdoor water use, I should say, which is, we're all very familiar with that. So Scituate alone, we saw a decrease of 200,000 to 300,000 gallons of water per day once our total outdoor water ban was implemented, which is great. We can save the water when we need to. But these droughts really impact our water resources. Both our surface water and groundwater supplies are depleting. Fires are a concern due to the dry conditions, but also the concern that there might not be enough water to fight those fires if they were to start. Habitats are strained, and recreation is impacted with decreased flows in rivers and lakes. So, this is a shared resource, and all of our actions impact each other. So you see how the state of Massachusetts is all in a similar state, but in Scituate, we have these wells and these reservoirs that we all share. And while the total outdoor water ban did save, as I mentioned earlier, 200,000 to 300,000 gallons of water per day, the town has issued over 75 fines to people who have violated the outdoor water ban. And that doesn't account for all of the warnings that the water department gives people before issuing a fine. So it's really important that we all work together so that we have enough water to get us through the rest of the summer and to manage these times of drought. So in addition to the outdoor water usage, there are a number of things that we can do to save water in our homes and our businesses. So this is a water conservation tips page on the Water Resource Commission's website. Lots of great tips, things that we've been collecting since 2016 when we had the last big drought. But we do want to encourage people to share your tips. You can send them to the email address at the bottom, wrc@scituatema.gov. And you just might see them on, I think it could be a great topic for another Scituate weekly YouTube video, which if you haven't seen them are really quite informative and also quite entertaining. And so then also we have groundwater, right? We've got a high instances of groundwater right now. We typically do this time of year. And why is there so much groundwater, especially after we replaced all of the cast iron pipes over the last few years? Shouldn't that have solved the problem? But that did solve a piece of the problem. Did the pipe replacement and ice pigging and the flushing did help remove all the sediment that was sitting in those pipes. So that iron and that manganese is no longer in our system, but we also have the problem of manganese in the reservoir. So there's naturally occurring manganese, and there's some manganese that exists in the sediment in the reservoir. And this summer's really hot temperatures and very little rain has increased concentration of manganese in the reservoir, which then enters the water treatment plant, and our current water treatment plant can't treat, it can't remove that manganese. So as a result, it ends up in our water system. For the most part, it's benign, but as most of you have likely seen, we did get an advisory this week that our manganese levels were in excess of DEP's advisory level. So the recommendation here is for anyone with children under the age of 1 to use bottled water for formula or for drinking water. And the water department has bottles of water that you can go and get for free. The general population is safe to use the water, but again, there is that bottled water available at the water treatment plant. So that's a snapshot of our water resources, Scituate water resources. So I have invited Sarah Grady and Samantha Woods from the North and South Rivers Watershed Association to provide us with a regional perspective and also to help us dig into some of the data. I'll turn it over to them.
Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha Woods. I'm the director for the North and South Rivers Watershed Association. Becky and Water Resource Commission, thank you for having us. You hit some of the things I was going to say, Becky, but I guess it's perhaps a little bit different interpretation. So regionally, or through, our precipitation deficit is almost 11 inches this year. I think when you hear that, it's like, whoa, like we lost a foot of water somewhere. So that's kind of, that's what the Blue Hills Observatory is. There may be some slight differences locally. So I just wanted to share that with you, because when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's significant. And I wanted to see if I could share. Can I share on your? on
Yes, you
here?
can, Miss Woods.
Okay, thank you. I can, but will I be able to see what I want to share? Hold on a second. Give me a second, please, while I figure out there which one. Okay, Becky already shared with you this. This is the state's regional and statewide drought status map. This is reflecting conditions since July 1st. There will be, and then this was declared August 9th. So remember, drought is always something we see in our rear view mirror. It's hard for us to forecast ahead. We know just locally, we wish there was rain today, but there wasn't. There will be another meeting of the Drought Management Task Force on August 23rd. And they will evaluate again whether or not we move out of a level 3 into a level 4 drought. There's nowhere else to go besides level 4, so hopefully we're not going there. So pray for rain. As Becky mentioned, when a level 3 critical drought is called by the state, the recommendation is that areas ban all non-essential outdoor water use. However, the state does not actually have the power to enforce that. That is a recommendation. There's a drought bill that did not pass through the state legislature this year that we hope to get passed perhaps next year, that would allow the state during these kinds of droughts to be able to issue regional bans, regional water restrictions. And I'm going to share, can you see this map? Yeah.
Yes.
So this is what really is happening when in terms of water restrictions in our area.
Mm.
Many of our communities, of course, are in water bans, but many are not. And that would change if we had a regional approach to this. So I just thought I would share that with you. As Becky mentioned, our flows in our rivers are quite low, and this is USGS gauge that has been in place in the Indian Head River since the 1960s. And we are below, way below what's called the 7Q10 flow, which is the lowest average 7 days in any 10-year period of flow. So ignore these little divots up because this is provisional data, but we're just hovering around 3 cubic feet per second in that river, and that's quite low. I will also just recommend for other water conservation tips. The town of Scituate is part of the Water Smart South Shore program, which is a regional program, and we are asking people to take the pledge to not water their lawn. I know there's a ban in place, but we're hoping by getting more people to take the pledge and perhaps put a sign in their yard, sharing with their neighbors the need for saving water for more important things like firefighting and drinking and all the things that we really need water for, that people will get into what we hope will be a culture of not needing water for lawns. So with that, I'll leave it to my colleague, Sarah Grady from our office. She's our watershed ecologist and the South Shore Regional Coordinator for the Massachusetts Bays National Estuary Partnership. Sarah?
Thanks, Sam. So what I'm going to talk briefly about is some of the work that we've been doing with the town to try to balance a need for municipal water as well as trying to maintain stream flow in our streams. So we try to keep the town informed about stream flows and also try to provide sort of advanced forecasts about when the town might need to go into a water ban based on current usage and reservoir levels, when stream flow might actually have to be cut off at a lower reservoir level, And then of course, how much water is in the reservoir. So now I'm gonna do my presenting here. Hang on 1 second.
While Sarah's doing that, I'll just mention that Sarah's forecasts are very conservative.
Thank
So
you. Yes. All right.
And
So
drought, worse than drought conditions.
yeah. So the forecasts in general are based on the driest of years that the region experiences, and assuming much greater demand than actually the town often has, because it's based on the highest demand within the previous years for each span of time. So this shows the level of the reservoir throughout pretty much April through October over the past 4 years. And we have instituted with the town, or the town has instituted certain percent full levels of the reservoir where the town would go into a total outdoor water ban when the reservoir is about 50% full, and then cut off stream flow when the reservoir is about 20% full. And the presumption here is that we would want to have people stop doing outdoor watering before we would decide to let the streams run dry. So just looking at this past year, or this year right now, the reservoir has not reached the water ban level yet. The town did institute a water ban on August 2nd, but stream flow was cut off on May 9th. In 2020, both stream flow was cut off and a water ban went into place on June 27th. And then finally in 2019, there was not a water ban, but stream flow was cut off on August 14th. And just to sort of show another perspective on that, so this is based on sort of my model prediction. So what I do is I tell Sean every week, I say, okay, you have 2 months until you might have to go into a water ban, or you have 3 months until you would have to cut off stream flow. So in this case, this shows the difference between what my predictions were and what the town did. So in 2019, there was no need for a water ban. But then the stream flow was cut off prior to when the model predicted. But in 2020, it was only about 2 weeks before the model predicted. So the model was pretty much on target. Stream flow was cut off, even though the model did not predict that any stream flow would get cut off. In 2022, this year, the model predicted that the town should go into a water ban about 6 days after the actual water ban was implemented. And then again, I forgot to change that color, but stream flow cut off back in May. And as of now, the model's not predicting stream flow should be cut off. And on the bottom, these are days since April 15th, which is when we start providing information to the town. So I guess in summary, in many years, we're seeing stream flow cut off to the streams prior to the town going into a water ban, and also prior to being provided information from the conservative model that the stream flow should be cut off to keep the town safe. So those are my those are my 2 slides.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sarah and Sam. I'm going to jump back into screen sharing here. What the model doesn't account for and kind of can't account for are infrastructure issues. We have gone into water bans before, a couple years having nothing to do with water, the quantity of water we have, but having to do with the fact that we had to shut down our water treatment plant for repairs, that we had to shut down a well for repairs. And as a result, we had to kind of go into this emergency status. We kind of had to do that a little bit this year as well, kind of operating a little bit sooner than we would have, in order to protect the resource that we have to ensure that there's enough water for people moving forward throughout the course of the year. And so the next thing that I was going to look at is an infrastructure update and the progress that has been made since our last info session. So we replaced 5 miles of unlined cast iron and transite pipes, which is on top of the 30 miles total that have been replaced in the last few years. That first chunk of pipe being all that cast iron pipe to help get rid of the iron and the brown water. We brought a couple of new sources online. We have wells 17A and 18B, both of which were wells that had a lot of manganese in them, but then we were able to put green sand filters on them and the water is clean and able to re-enter the distribution system. There's a new source in progress, Dolan well fields. This is an area that would provide seasonal relief. It would fill in the winter and the spring and provide some assistance in the summer months when we have that increased usage. It's been reviewed by DEP and engineers are working on a basic design for whatever that on-site treatment will look like. And then, of course, we have the new water treatment plant. Over the last year, engineers have been working to identify the type of treatment process that will be the most effective for the very special type of water that we have here in Scituate. And once they were able to identify the appropriate treatment process, they were then able to develop a set of criteria to help determine where to site the project. And there will be a vote at town meeting on September 19th at 7 p.m. About where to site that water treatment plant. So as you can see from this slide, there are quite a few criteria that were identified in terms of site selection. One of the primary ones being close proximity to the water source. So you can see they then looked within a radius of that water source and the preferred location has been identified as Stearns Meadow. And that's really the only area that checks the most boxes for this type of treatment. That's the wrong way. Oh, so actually, sorry. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to say too is that, well, first, there is this new water treatment plant project website on the town's site. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Lots of great resources here. That map is an interactive map that you can play around with and look at those different sites and understand what the evaluations were. A lot of FAQs on there, and there are new documents being added all the time. So this piece will be going to presented to the select board next Tuesday on the 23rd for a final decision. And we do ask that you hold any technical questions that you might have about the water treatment plant until that meeting. And so the engineers have a chance to present kind of even a grander update than what I've got here. This is more so what's happened over the last year or so. So one of the things that has happened over the last year is looking at a conceptual site layout. So this is about a 15% design. The one on the left is the original layout that was presented back in June, I believe. And the one on the right is the most recent and the current site layout. And you can see how the layout has changed, the scope and the scale of the project has changed. A lot of this has come about from meetings with residents and other people providing input. It's also been a result of getting some more of the pilot test results have come in and some things have changed as a result. And this will continue to go through additional reviews once the site is selected. As you can see here from this timeline, which is also on that water treatment plant project update page. Can't get my pointer going, but we're here on the left. We're just before this September town meeting. And once the site is selected, we then have all of these local and state permitting processes. And especially where you see the town of Scituate permitting, which is in that spring 2023 piece, there'll be a lot of opportunities for input. Each of these boards is going to have public hearings around, or most of these boards will have public hearings around the final plans, that final design that is submitted over these coming months. As you can see, the WT process design will take a few months starting this fall and hopefully ending in the spring of 2023. And then once that permitting process is complete, the project will go out to bid, construction will happen, and the goal is to have the new water treatment plant online September 26th. I also want to bring your attention to the Scituate Water Resource Update page. You can get to this one pretty easily by typing in situatema.gov/water. Here we have up-to-date information in terms of the water ban, info sessions. We also have some info sheets on water treatment plants and lawn watering, things that we don't cover on the Water Resources Commission page. And two of the things I just wanted to highlight about the water treatment plants that I think sometimes get lost in the conversation is, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, is that a new water treatment plant will allow our wells to recharge during the winter. Right now, our wells are running all year long, and as a result, they're just out of steam. And at this point, they really are very much out of steam, especially with the drought. And this will allow that groundwater to recharge and refill those systems and provide us with more water to pump through the system. And also allow us to have that more balanced system that I mentioned earlier on. And the other thing I want to mention is that the new water treatment plant, it's not going to create any new water, right? Our annual allocation of water is still going to be 1.8 million gallons per day. We're still pulling from the same reservoir and the same wells, but this treatment plant will allow us to more effectively and efficiently treat the water that we have in the system. So with that, I'm going to move on to Q&A. So we will ask that people raise their hands. And also just a reminder, I have got our email address down there, wrc@situatema.gov. If you have any questions, anything that doesn't get addressed tonight, anything you think of in the future, give us a shout. I will ask that people ask one question at a time. If you have more than one question, ask one, and then we'll move on. And then you can come back on towards the end just so we can move it along. So go ahead and raise your hands. Oh, here we go. I'm looking at the wrong place. All right, here we go. So this is Peter, is it Tarode? I'm gonna ask you to unmute and you can unmute yourself.
Tarode.
Tarode, sorry about that.
Yes. Have any considerations being given to incentives to collect rainwater? I've got an experimental system that I've worked on, and I've been collecting rainwater without any incident for about 3 years now. It goes into a tank with an overflow, and I'm about to try out an electric pump to see how well that can result in effective irrigation of lawns and gardens and things like that. Are there any incentives that would be entertained for systems like that, or some sort of incentive?
Okay, yeah, definitely. Thank you. That's fantastic. So that's so interesting. So we've been working, the Water Resources Commission has been working on a proposal for a rebate program that came about as a result of a citizens petition at a town meeting a year or so ago. And now that you mention it, rainwater capture isn't actually on that list of rebates. So that's just something I don't know that we thought of from an outdoor watering perspective. So we'll definitely get back to that at our next meeting next week. We are also working on a water offset program. And there is an opportunity, and that's for new developments, to have to pay a fee to mitigate the additional water that that development will use. But one way you can decrease that fee is by having rainwater catchment or cistern. So in that sense, that's incentivized. And we also, for the last couple of years, the Water Resources Commission has organized a rain barrel program. And the rain barrels have been sold for a very, very low price. So in a sense, it was kind of incentivized in that it was offered through the town, and it was $20 or $30 cheaper than you can find it pretty much anyplace else. So thank you for that comment, and we'll revisit that from the residential rebate perspective at our next meeting.
Becky, can I comment on that?
Sure.
Peter, one thing, if you are setting something up, we have something down at the highway barn. We've got about 1,000-gallon tank, and it takes the rainwater, and we've got an electric pump on the bottom. We use that similar to a hose, and what we're able to do is wash a lot of our trucks off with that. So if you're interested in looking at our system, we could set something up for you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I did a calculation, and I think a tank of about 5,000 to 7,000 gallons would be adequate to collect enough rainwater to do irrigation all summer long. It's a fairly large tank, so you could probably do with something less, but it would help mitigate a little bit of the brown lawns that we see here as well.
Yeah,
So just wanted to pass that by.
thank you. Jim Seaton, I ask you to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi.
I'd like to know, a few years ago, we approved, I think at town meeting, work to go forward to raise the level of the reservoir.
Mm.
And I have lost track of where that project is, what the status of it is. One way to help with this is to get more water into the reservoir. So could you address that, please?
That's a great question. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, so that project would increase the storage of the reservoir by about 30 days. And it's kind of increasing the lip of the reservoir, and very basic description. So as that stands, I'm trying to even think of what the stage is we're at, where there was a draft environmental report that was submitted to the state and comments were submitted back, and the town, we owe some information to the consultant engineers so that he can submit the final environmental report. From there will be permitting, it will go out to bid, and there will be construction. But hopefully that's a project we can rejuvenate along with the water treatment plant. Anybody else want to add to that?
No, the only thing I'll say is it did take a back burner because our engineers have been working on the Dolan well field, the new treatment plant for different work on that. We're also looking at well 17 and 18, just finishing that. So we've been short on bandwidth ourselves. So just getting through the day-by-day stuff.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, that will be the shortest info session we've ever hosted. Oh, there we go. I see one. Is that Peter again?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead.
One of the things I think that looking forward with the replacement of pipes is if we could try to engage some technology to monitor for leaks as we go along. I know there are ultrasonic technologies that could help us conserve water by minimizing the number of leaks. I mean, some of the leaks are relatively small, some of them can be relatively large, and it'd be nice to know if something's leaking, where it is and how much is leaking, so that we could take a look at repairing or determining where the leak is and then repairing it. And you could, I think you could significantly reduce the amount of water. So perhaps an audit of gallons pumped versus gallons delivered would be a good place to start. But with the same thing in mind, I think an ultrasonic technology or some sort of technology that could monitor leaks in the system and report the leaks and the volume ahead of time would be great.
I can take that one, Becky, if you'd like.
Sure, go for it.
So Peter, we actually monitor daily. We look at our flows and we look at where our output is and we watch where the tanks are. And if there is a large discrepancy, we know about it right away. Sean's operators call the distribution guys and say, we have a problem because the tanks are not filling up. So we can track that down pretty good. The other thing that we do is twice a year, we do leak detection. We actually have a company come out and do ultrasonic tests on all the pipes throughout the whole system, looking for leaks and try to eliminate it. We've done an excellent job. I think at one point, Scituate proper was probably around 24 to 25% water loss, and we're down below 10% now. And
Wow.
Sean can correct me if my number's a little high on the 27%, but it was significant with a lot of those older pipes, as well as we probably had a water break once a week to twice a week.
Wow, impressive.
And I will say leak detection is a project that fees that are gathered as part of the water offset program. That's a project that those fees could fund in the future. All right, Jim C, and I see you've got another one as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Second question. We do see on the water restrictions page there, owners of private wells are encouraged to reduce flow. Is there anything that can be done to mandate reduced flow by private wells for irrigation purposes?
Another excellent question, Jim. So that's something, the Board of Health regulates private wells. And there has been a lot of discussion over the last few years, I would say, about requiring private well owners to follow the irrigation restrictions. The Board of Health has decided not to include that as part of their restrictions. But it is something the Water Resources Commission always talks about. We're, trying to come up with different ways to gather data to better understand the impacts or help kind of prove the impacts. We do believe that private wells dip into the same system as our public wells and our reservoir. And as I mentioned before, it's all connected and we all, our usage impacts each other. And, but you're dealing with some other different legal issues with the private wells. So I do encourage you to maybe attend some Water Resource Commission meetings. If it's something you're interested in, and we can talk about a little bit more about how we're trying to get that data and what that might look like moving forward. But for as of now, that doesn't seem to be an option. So we do really strongly encourage private well owners to follow the irrigation restrictions, just so that it's fair.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, any other questions? Okay. So that's amazing. If anything comes up, as I said, just email us. One thing I want to say, I realize I didn't say, is, there was a bit of a common thread throughout all of these issues I mentioned, aside from the drought piece, but in terms of water delivery, groundwater, meeting our stream flow targets and the water ban, it's infrastructure, right? It's a water treatment plant. Our current water treatment plant desperately needs to be updated, and not even updated. We need a new water treatment plant in order to solve these problems. And I think I can speak for the Water Resources Commission in saying it's something that we believe is imminently needed, and we can't wait any longer. So I do encourage everyone to attend the select board meeting presentation next Tuesday, the 23rd, to hear the engineer's presentation, and just show up at town meeting on September 19th at 7 p.m. at the high school to vote yes on one. And I see we got another question from Lewis Chin. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I have a question following on Peter's question about private wells. You've indicated that the aquifer is being depleted. My question is, do you have an estimate on how much the private wells are contributing to that depletion of our public wells?
We don't, because we don't, private wells aren't metered. And so we don't know how much water the private wells use. So we have started a new program with the new water conservation bylaw that passed last summer to register private wells so that we can have a better understanding. Well, we can just have a better understanding of where everything is, but we can't monitor or meter the amount of water they use. So we can't say how much, what percentage of our usage. We can't even say that. We can't say how much of an impact that they have. But, you could have a private well user that irrigates one single family home, but you could also have a private well that irrigates a development. So there's a real range of usage and impacts there as well.
A related question?
Sure. But actually, before you do, does anybody else want to add to that?
Actually, if I could,
Please.
So I guess just this general thread, I think that these are fabulous questions because it comes back to data and the data collection, and actually what Kevin was talking about with some of the new investments on the SCADA, which is like the internal ways that you can kind of monitor some of the water flows and everything. especially with the private wells and other areas, I think the discussions are going to be hopefully much more data driven as we kind of go forward. And I just love kind of hearing folks talking about those sort of things, because that's going to kind of help us also not only just address which areas to go after, but also when we start talking about restrictions and what we can do with and what we with private wells, it's going to be a lot more of an informed discussion as we go forward. So as you said, Becky, with getting the registration, we're starting that process to ensure that we can get that data in there. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded, but that's I think it's important.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, Lou, you had another question.
Well, thank you for indicating that it is going to be data-driven. My question was, we have a permit to take out 1.8 million gallons.
Mhm.
And today, I think it was stated that the wells can't deliver anywhere close to that. And my question is, are we fighting private wells when we see the output of the existing wells dropping off? Are we fighting them for the aquifer supply? And is the Board of Health the proper agency to be approving private wells for irrigation? And I've had a conversation with Freya about this, and she told me that she worked hard to try to get some control over the private wells. I appreciate that, Freya. But what can we do to get a control on this? I hate to see us spending money developing new public wells, and the private wells are depleting, if the private wells are depleting the aquifer for us. It seems like we're constantly competing for that same water supply. And Andrew, I sympathize with you, but and we do need more data, but there seems to be an awful lot of water going out in irrigation. And as we see these large development projects going through with a lot of irrigation onto their lawns, are we just, are we spending, how wisely is it to keep developing wells when we're going against private wells? And I know, Kevin, you're working on the Dolan field, but as we start to develop more and more wells, are we just in a diminishing return?
You want me to try to answer some of that, Becky?
Sure.
So, Lou, I understand 100% what you're saying, and I believe a lot of the private wells are more state driven. It's not necessarily town driven that we can necessarily ban the private wells. People have a natural right to drill for water on their lawn. The difference is that sometimes we're even competing with different towns, like we may be in the same aquifer as Norwell, and they're pumping. The Dolan well fields would be a different aquifer from where we're getting the majority of our water. And that's why we're looking at new sources. We're looking at new sources all over town. But the Dolan well field was something, it was permitted back in late 70s, early 80s, and it never came to fruition. And that's something that we're looking at now, and seeing how that we can get that source up and running. And if we can use that water, because the water is actually a perched water that we can use more often during the summer months when we need it the most. So that's how we're looking at it. But there's a lot of state regulations also. And I don't know if you've talked to Drew about it at all at the Board of Health, but he might be a source just to give you a little information on it also.
Right. I agree that the state does have regulations. My question is, should we be working with our state reps to try to change that, to give the town a little more control over the private wells that we compete with for the water supply?
Yeah, I think that would be great. It would be something that we could work on, and maybe it's something you could discuss with the Water Resources Committee in the future. that's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree, Lou. That was going to be my comment was, if you want to come to our next meeting or one future meeting, and we can kind of think about next steps for that, whether it's an outreach campaign, different ways to get data, whatever it may be. We definitely welcome your input because we don't have a solution right now.
Maybe a referendum question.
Yeah, bring it on. Come on to one of the meetings and we can talk it through.
I could just answer a little bit that there are some other communities that have instituted bylaws that have prevented the irrigation wells. There's been some challenges to that, but you can regulate them.
So they have prevented the construction of new irrigation wells, or it has kept them required that they follow the irrigation ban?
It may be that they've been required to follow the irrigation ban, but
Okay.
Mass Rivers Alliance, I think I gave you their report on that. There are some other communities that have regulated private wells, but not to say without controversy or perhaps legal challenges, or even going back to town meeting and undoing. I think Hamilton, maybe
Right.
that happened, but there are some towns that have done it, and you're on better legal footing if you can do it in your zone 2, which is the area that contributes to your drinking water supply. Because then you could prove that you'd have more scientific basis for saying that there's a competitiveness between your public well or your public water supply and the private. But then I think it becomes an equity issue, right? And it's an enforcement issue and a challenge, because it's not like there's a line that says here's the zone 2 that you can see on above the ground.
Right.
So I think that there are some things out there. There's nothing perfect, but certainly there have been people that have other communities in Massachusetts that have taken some action in that arena.
Yeah, and I think, and maybe Joanne or Freya can correct me if I'm wrong. I think in some of the research we did from reaching out to those towns in that report, most if not all of them said that there was no enforcement. Is that right, Joanne? Were you one who made the calls, or you're muted? So I have to ask you to unmute. That's on me.
I have to go back and look at, you're getting me thinking about all that research I did, and I'll go back and look. Yeah, there are just a handful of communities that are really enforcing it, but whether they do they collect fine? No. Do they, it's on the books, but do they do anything about it? Don't know.
Right.
And that's in the regulation, right?
Yeah.
That's not banning, though, the ability to do it. I think legally, I'm not sure you could ban people from it, but I don't really know. Yeah.
And I do think a number of those towns also were required to do so as a result of withdrawing more than their Water Management Act permit. No, I'm misremembering that.
I think that's a different problem.
Okay. Well, Lou, thanks for reinvigorating that conversation. And like I said, join us and we'd be happy to talk a bit more and figure out some next steps there. So we've got Deb Lenahan with a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay, the question I have is, the North and South River Watershed has been trying to work with the town in terms of trying to restore the fish, the herring to the first herring brook. And we have a fish ladder that is there that the town does open up the water. And but the question I have is why they terminate that water flow so that the fish can neither go up nor come down before they put on a water ban to irrigating lawns. And it just seems that the lawns take precedent to the fish. And I'm wondering if you could address that.
So I can, a little bit at least. So for the last, I think since 2011, there have been some operational procedures that were agreed on between the town and the North and South Rivers Watershed Association. And part of that operational procedure was what levels of the reservoir would trigger a watering ban and what levels would trigger The down, oh, you know what, actually, I can't, no, I'm sorry. So I was gonna say that I had it mixed up. The operational procedure has the water ban going first before the stream flow releases, so I was misreading. So Kevin, do you have a response to that? Or Sean might be able
Oh,
to?
I can try to respond and Sean can step in if need be. This year, we knew we were going into a drought. We became very concerned about our water. I know we have plans and formulas and everything else about showing how much water we can release, but we didn't want to draw everything down. Part of the problems we were having is the temperature of the water in the reservoir. And what Sean's been doing is he's been drafting water out of it at different times in order to keep the manganese down as much as possible. So if there was an instance where there were fish and down the bottom, I mean, we could open everything up, but we've been really tied up with problems at the plant, and that's been our main push.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Luchin. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to respond to Deb. Deb, I don't know if you were one of the volunteer counters, but this year the count on that fish ladder was pretty dismal, unfortunately.
And you're talking about people who volunteered to count to see if there are any fish going through the fish ladder.
That's right.
Okay.
And I think there were 2 fish counted for the entire 2 months of the study.
I'll just say that, they need water, so that's part of it. And if we don't supply the water, obviously those particular fish are not going to be able to make it in and out of the system. But it's not just for the herring, it's for any aquatic stream life that would be downstream of the reservoirs. So there's more than herring that are living in those rivers that really require some kind of flow, de minimis flow.
Has that been an area where we've seen herring in the past?
Yeah.
Or a good deal, yeah.
Yep. And it's like mice, for every 2 you see, there's more.
Right.
You just don't see them all.
We had 10 herring that were sighted this year.
Okay.
And they started to show up on April 30th. And as you may recall, the stream flow was cut off about a week later on May 9th. So, that was kind of at the beginning of the run for the first herring brook for this year.
But I think over that time, we still had overflow going at those times. It just wasn't to the requested stream flow releases, correct?
No, according to the stream gauges, after May 9th, the stream flow was very low between May 9th and June 8th. Then it came back up between June 8th and June 22nd. And then it hasn't been really present since June 22nd.
No, understood. It's a tricky balance, managing the whole water system. Obviously, we would love to do the full releases if it was possible. Sometimes we get really nervous on our water supply and, take action and hold things up.
I think what would be worthwhile would be to, in accordance with the prioritization, if you wanted to cut off stream flow like this year on May 9th, you would also go into a total outdoor watering ban on May 9th.
And we'd have no problem with that. We were in discussion about that at that time.
Right. It didn't happen, but I guess that's.
No, I think we were 7 days late. After that, we did it pretty quick afterwards for the water ban.
No, the water ban was in August. The stream flow was cut off in May.
Oh, so you're saying if we stop stream flows, do a complete water ban for the town
Yeah.
at that time?
Yeah.
That was the policy that was put in place with the Board of Water Commissioners with the stream flow release plan.
Yep.
You know, the priority was that, you know, we wouldn't have people watering their lawns at the same time that we're killing this fish run.
And I know when you went into the water ban, due to the operational concerns this year, which was June 29th, that was not the full outdoor watering ban. And, you know, had you been able to just stay with that even, it probably would have been beneficial.
Oh, there's always room for improvement, so hopefully we do better next year.
Fair enough. Conversations to be continued to be had. There's lots of them that will result from this session. Any other questions? Oh, there is one. Okay. The Jim Hunt. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
I want to cycle back. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I want to cycle back to the reservoir expansion project. 30 days of water is a lot of water. And I'm really disappointed to hear that it's on, quote, the back burner. And I assume that's due to a lack of resources. So Kevin, if you could specify the resources that you need to get that permitting project back on track, that might make me feel a little bit better about that.
Well, if we could do everything at once, Jim, I'd feel a lot better about everything. You know, we've got water projects going on with pipe projects, as well as working with the plant, the pilot study, as well as every other project going in town. To be honest with you, I'm engineer shy on people that are just running it and getting everything pushed together. And we want to coordinate everything that we do the coordination with the new plant itself. So what we want to do is make sure the engineers go forward when we're doing the design and take this into consideration so we can do them both at the same time, as opposed to doing them at different times and having conflicts. One of the fears that we had is that there could be overlaps, one that would stop the other one from going forward. So we wanted to kind of harmonize the two projects to work at the same time. But we did have some difficulties because we've been doing a lot of other things in preparation for the plant. Does that make sense? Or
well, yeah, not to mention the 60-day delay in the location decision. So what is the 10,000-foot view of the timeline? If you had the resources appear tomorrow, what would be the timeline for this reservoir expansion project in general terms?
well, it's kind of a combination also, because we want to know the location where the plant is going to go, so that while we're designing things, we can keep everything together, because one of the things in the new plant is a new intake. So that
Right.
new intake would be affected on the raising of the reservoir, everything else. So we want to have our engineers take a good hard look at it, but we've had them focused on other things. So it's had a domino effect on slowing other projects up.
So there is no general view of a timeline if the resources appeared tomorrow.
Well, we actually did have a combined meeting with both engineering groups to go over that on how we were going to go forward with the two projects and see what we could potentially permit together. But
Right.
we haven't had one in a while because we've been focusing on getting everything squared to get the treatment plant. That's our priority right now, is to get the treatment plant going forward. And as that gets back, if that gets back on track, then, and we know the location where it's going to go, then we can start pushing forward on the other projects.
And we're still a month out from even that information. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I did not realize it was that far back on the back burner, but
In back burner might be the wrong word, Jim, because, sometimes we say that, but, our main focus has been the treatment plant, and we want to make sure that we don't want to have one go through that negatively affects the other one. So my priority is to get the treatment plant through first, and then we could start working on some of these other projects. And yeah, 30 days is huge, and that'd be a huge help. I'm sure Sarah and Sam would be happy if I could give them a little more water for the fish, and they wouldn't be giving me a hard time at these meetings stating that, I don't want to give all my water to the fish. I'm sorry, I'm cheap like that. But, we get nervous, and, we don't know what's going to happen in August and September. And when we hear drought, we got to make some decisions and do the best we can. And, we only have so many people to do everything that we are doing.
okay, so just understand that I'm going to call you every once in a while on this one, okay?
No problem at all. Gladly talk about it.
All right, thanks for the time, folks.
No problem.
Thank you, Jim. Any final questions or any final comments that any of the Water Resource Commission members or board members or anybody else wants to say anything?
I will say one other thing towards Jim, hopefully he's still here. If we push through and had that project going forward now, and we were getting the 30 days of water, it'd be fantastic. But if it negatively affected the treatment plant, we'd be looking like a bunch of knuckleheads. So that's kind of what we were trying to avoid.
Was that another question, Jim, or just a? Got it. All right. Well, thanks everyone for taking an hour out of your August again to join us on the info session and having some great questions and some good conversation and hopefully spurring some new action. So hope to see you all at September 19th and next week at the select board meeting, and please do reach out if you have any additional questions. Thanks.
Becky, we just want to, the board would like to thank you for hosting this and for the informative conversation. And most of us we're on tonight, so we will certainly take this back in our deliberations as well.
Okay, great. I do have one more hand, Sarah. I gotta unmute.
Yeah, it took me a second to look something up. So during the last 2 weeks of July, the town was losing about a month of water supply every week. And about 6% of that was attributable to the stream flow requirement. The rest of that was demand and some changes to available water due to the drought. So the
fish are not the fish aren't the problem. But we hear you, Kevin, and we just want to make sure that we're not watering lawns when we are also protecting our resources.
Well, as long as Jim agrees to, agree to shut all water down immediately in April, I think we could all agree on it and go in front of the selectmen and get them to buy off on it too. But no, we hear you. We can work together. It's been a trying year. We've had a lot of problems, with our plant and, brown water and everything else. So doing the best we can with what we got.
Sam, I have to jump in and say that the board will definitely talk about, when are we notified about stream release? It's not a typical thing that is done, that we're notified of, and that would be a great thing for us to know. But as Kevin has pointed out, it's a very delicate, as you are well aware, very delicate decision about all of these things. So we can work on it, and we appreciate bringing it to the water resources and to the board's attention again.
Next year, what we'll do is, or maybe from now on, we'll just include the select board on my emails to Sean that I send every week.
Wait, that would be Andrew, right? You're the liaison?
Please do. No, please. More than happy to have those.
All right, anything else? All right, everyone. I'm sorry.
We have to vote to adjourn, but Becky, I do want to just say thank you and Samantha and Sarah and Kevin and all the great questions that we had tonight. It was, I think, a very informative session.
Great. So
I
we're
move that we adjourn.
yes, absolutely. Do we both need to adjourn?
Okay, so I'll go first and then you can close it out. So the select board members will hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
She did. Karen seconded, but she's muted.
I saw Karen Conley seconded, and all those in favor. Aye. So we are now officially adjourned. 4-0.
So I just usually make a motion to adjourn and then we adjourn.
Okay.
So I'm making a motion to adjourn. Thank you all for participating. And for, as Andrew said, being part of a great conversation, and look forward to more of these moving forward.